The groundskeeper's flashlight trembled as it illuminated something impossible. There, on the fresh grave of Thomas Brennan, lay a golden retriever, but he wasn't alone anymore. Surrounding him were 7 other dogs, sitting in perfect silence, like guardians of something sacred. What in God's name was happening here? But to understand this moment, we need to go back 3 days earlier, to the funeral that broke a loyal heart. Because what happened next would prove that love transcends even death itself. Rain hammered down on Riverside Cemetery as they lowered Thomas Brennan into the ground. Among the 30 mourners stood one figure who understood loss differently than the rest. A golden retriever named Captain, his silver muzzle dripping with rainwater, his brown eyes fixed on the descending casket. Thomas's daughter, Sarah, held Captain's leash with trembling hands. She'd been dreading this moment for days, not just because she was burying her father, but because she knew what would come next. "Come on, boy," she whispered, tugging gently. "We have to go." Captain didn't move. His paws seemed rooted to the muddy earth. Thomas Brennan had rescued Captain from a kill shelter 8 years ago, a senior dog that nobody wanted, scheduled to be euthanized the next morning. Thomas, himself a widower of 72, had walked into that shelter looking for companionship. When he saw Captain cowering in the back of a concrete cell, matted and defeated, something clicked. 2 old souls, both discarded by the world, found each other. From that day forward, they were inseparable. Thomas and Captain walked 4 miles every morning. They sat together on the porch every evening. When Thomas was diagnosed with lung cancer 2 years ago, Captain never left his side. During the chemotherapy sessions, during the hospital stays, during the final hospice weeks, Captain was there, his head resting on Thomas's chest, as if trying to transfer his own heartbeat to his failing master. Now Thomas was gone, and Captain knew it. Sarah finally managed to pull him away from the grave, but Captain's resistance was heartbreaking. He dug his claws into the mud, whimpering, his eyes never leaving the spot where his master had disappeared into the earth. Several mourners wiped away tears, not for Thomas, but for the dog who loved him. That night, Sarah brought Captain to her apartment across town. She'd prepared everything: a soft bed, Thomas's old blanket that still smelled like him, his favorite toys. But Captain wouldn't eat, he wouldn't sleep. He just sat by the door, waiting. At 3 in the morning, Sarah woke to find the door open and Captain gone. Her heart sank. She grabbed her coat and keys, knowing exactly where he'd gone. When she arrived at Riverside Cemetery 40 minutes later, her headlights caught a golden shape lying on the fresh mound of dirt. Captain had somehow traveled 12 miles through the city, crossed 2 highways, and found his way back to Thomas's grave. He was lying there, his head resting on the disturbed earth, as if trying to get as close as possible to the man beneath. Sarah approached slowly. "Captain, how did you even get here?" The dog didn't acknowledge her. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell with labored breaths. He looked ancient in that moment, exhausted from his journey but determined. Sarah sat beside him in the darkness, stroking his damp fur. "I know you miss him," she said softly. "I miss him too, but you can't stay here, buddy. You'll freeze. Please come home with me." Captain's only response was a low, mournful whine. Sarah tried everything. She called to him, offered treats, even attempted to carry him, but the 70-pound dog was dead weight. Every time she tried to move him, he would go rigid, refusing to cooperate. Finally, defeated and crying, Sarah covered him with a blanket and drove home, promising to return at dawn. She called her brother Marcus in tears. "He's going to die out there," she sobbed. "He's just going to lay on that grave until he dies." Marcus, ever practical, suggested they contact animal control in the morning. They'd know what to do, but Sarah couldn't sleep. The image of Captain, alone and grieving on that dark grave, haunted her. At 5:30 in the morning, unable to bear it any longer, she drove back to the cemetery. What she found changed everything. As her car approached through the early morning mist, her headlights revealed not 1 dog, but 8. Captain was still there, in the exact same position, but now he was surrounded. A German shepherd sat at attention to his right. A small terrier mix curled against his left side. A husky, a pit bull, a border collie, and 2 mutts of indeterminate breed had formed a circle around him. Sarah stopped the car, her mouth open in disbelief. Where had these dogs come from? She got out slowly, not wanting to startle them. The dogs didn't move. They simply sat there like a silent vigil, their eyes reflecting the golden dawn light. It was the most surreal thing she'd ever seen. One of the dogs, the German Shepherd, wore a collar. Sarah approached carefully and checked the tag. His name was Rex, and there was a phone number. She called it immediately. A groggy male voice answered. "Hello? Hi. I'm sorry to call so early, but I'm at Riverside Cemetery, and there's a German Shepherd here named Rex. Is he yours?" There was a pause. "Rex? Yeah, he's mine. Wait, what? The cemetery? How did he get there?" "I don't know, but you need to come get him, and bring a truck if you can. There are 7 other dogs here too." Within an hour, the cemetery had become an impromptu gathering place. 5 dog owners had arrived, each one baffled by how their pets had escaped and ended up here. The other 3 dogs had no collars, no identification, strays that had somehow been drawn to this place. The groundskeeper, an older man named Henry, arrived for his shift and stood staring at the scene. "In 40 years of working here, I've never seen anything like this," he muttered. One of the dog owners, a woman named Patricia, who owned the border collie, approached Sarah. "Which one is yours?" "The golden retriever," Sarah said, pointing to Captain, who still hadn't moved. "He was my father's dog. My father was buried here 3 days ago." Patricia's eyes widened. "So he came back to the grave?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He escaped from my apartment last night and somehow found his way here. I came back this morning and found all these other dogs surrounding him. I don't understand it." An elderly man with the husky spoke up. "Dogs know things we don't. My grandfather used to say they can sense grief like a beacon. Maybe these dogs sensed your boy's pain and came to comfort him." Marcus, who had arrived shortly after Sarah called him, was more skeptical. "Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Dogs escape all the time." But Henry, the groundskeeper, shook his head. "Not like this. Look at them. They're not playing or wandering. They're sitting vigil. I've seen people do this for each other, but never dogs for another dog." Sarah knelt beside Captain and stroked his head. "Boy, look, you're not alone. These friends came for you. But we need to go home now. Please." For the first time since she'd found him, Captain lifted his head. He looked at the dogs surrounding him, then back at Sarah. Something in his eyes had shifted. The desperate grief was still there, but now there was something else, a flicker of recognition, of connection. The German Shepherd, Rex, stood and walked over to Captain. He nuzzled the golden retriever's face, and Captain responded with a weak tail wag. Then the terrier came over, licking Captain's ear. One by one, the dogs approached, each offering their own form of comfort. It was as if they were telling him, "We understand, we're here. You're part of the pack." Patricia wiped her eyes. "I've never seen anything like this in my life." Sarah felt something break open in her chest. These dogs, strangers to each other and to Captain, had somehow come together in the darkest hour to offer solidarity. It was pure, instinctual compassion. Finally, after several minutes of this canine communion, Captain stood. His legs were shaky, and he looked exhausted, but he stood. He took one last look at Thomas's grave, let out a long, mournful howl that echoed across the cemetery, and then turned toward Sarah. "Okay, boy," she whispered, "let's go home." But something unexpected happened. As Sarah led Captain toward her car, the other dogs followed, all of them. They walked in a loose formation behind Captain, as if escorting him, protecting him. The dog owners looked at each other in confusion. "Rex, come," Patricia called. "Her border collie. Maggie, come here." But the dogs didn't respond. They followed Captain all the way to Sarah's car, and only when he was safely inside did they stop. Then, as if released from a spell, they returned to their owners. Henry stood watching, shaking his head. "I've worked with the dead for 40 years, he said quietly, "but I've never seen the living teach me more about loyalty and love than what I just witnessed." Over the next few weeks, something beautiful emerged from that strange morning. The dog owners, who had been complete strangers, formed a group. They met every Saturday at a local dog park, bringing their pets together. They called themselves the Cemetery 7, in honor of the 7 dogs who had surrounded Captain. Captain became the unofficial mascot of the group. Slowly, with the support of these new friends, both human and canine, he began to heal. He started eating again. He played with Rex and Maggie. He even wagged his tail when Sarah came home from work. But every Sunday morning, Sarah would take Captain back to Riverside Cemetery. They would sit together at Thomas's grave, and Captain would lay his head on the grass, peaceful now instead of desperate. And sometimes, without any coordination, other members of the Cemetery 7 would show up. They'd sit together in comfortable silence, their dogs resting nearby, honoring the bond that had brought them all together. Henry, the groundskeeper, started leaving water bowls near Thomas's grave on Sundays. He never said anything about it, but everyone understood. This place of death had become, in its own way, a celebration of life and loyalty. 6 months after Thomas's death, something remarkable happened. Sarah received a call from Patricia. "You need to come to the cemetery," she said urgently. "But don't worry, it's good news." When Sarah arrived with Captain, she found the entire Cemetery 7 group gathered around Thomas's grave. Next to the headstone stood a new addition, a bronze statue of a dog lying peacefully on the ground, its head resting on its paws. The plaque read, "In memory of Captain and Thomas Brennan, a love that death could not separate, and for all the loyal companions who remind us what devotion truly means." Sarah broke down crying. "Who did this?" "We all did," Patricia said. "We raised the money together. The community heard about what happened, about Captain and the other dogs, and donations poured in. People wanted to commemorate it." Captain walked up to the statue and sniffed it curiously. Then he lay down beside it, his head resting on the grass, exactly as he had that first night. "This is perfect," Sarah whispered. "Thank you." A local news station had gotten wind of the story and sent a reporter. The segment aired that evening, and it went viral. Within days, millions of people around the world had seen the footage of Captain lying beside the bronze statue, of the Cemetery 7 dogs playing together, of Sarah telling the story with tears in her eyes. Comments flooded in from every corner of the internet. "We don't deserve dogs. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'm not crying, you're crying. Faith in humanity restored because of dogs." But the most meaningful comment came from a shelter worker in Chicago who wrote, "Because of this story, we've had 17 senior dogs adopted this week. People are calling them Captain dogs. You've saved lives by sharing this." That comment made Sarah realize something profound. Thomas had saved Captain from death 8 years ago. Now, in a strange twist of fate, Captain's loyalty was saving other dogs from the same fate. The cycle of rescue had come full circle. Captain lived for 3 more years after Thomas's death. They were good years, filled with long walks, new friendships, and Sunday visits to the grave. He never fully stopped grieving. Dogs don't work that way. But he found a new purpose. He became a therapy dog, visiting hospitals and nursing homes, bringing comfort to people who were facing their own losses. When Captain finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 14, there was no question where he would be buried. Sarah had him cremated, and with the cemetery's permission, she buried his ashes at the base of Thomas's headstone, right beneath the bronze statue. The Cemetery 7 held a memorial service. All 7 original dogs attended, older now but still bonded by that inexplicable night when they'd been called to comfort a grieving stranger. They sat in a circle around the grave, just as they had years before, and Sarah read a letter she'd written. "Dear Captain, you taught me that love doesn't end when life does. You showed me that loyalty isn't just a word, it's a choice we make every single day. And you proved that sometimes, in our darkest moments, help comes from the most unexpected places. Thank you for loving my father so completely. Thank you for teaching all of us what devotion really means. Rest now, good boy. You're with him again." As she scattered rose petals on the grave, something extraordinary happened. A stray dog emerged from the nearby woods. A young mixed breed with scared eyes and matted fur. It walked directly to Captain's grave and lay down beside the bronze statue, its head resting on the ground. Everyone froze. Sarah looked at Patricia, who looked at Marcus, who looked at Henry. Henry smiled. "Looks like Captain's still rescuing dogs even now." Sarah approached the stray slowly. The dog didn't run. It just looked up at her with those frightened eyes, waiting. She checked. No collar. The dog was thin, obviously abandoned or lost. Sarah made a decision in that moment. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you home." As she led the dog to her car, it looked back once at the bronze statue, at the place where Captain had shown the world what unconditional love looked like. Then it followed Sarah, trusting, hopeful. The Cemetery 7 continued meeting for years after Captain's death. New members joined as they heard the story. Dogs and their humans gathering every Saturday, celebrating the bond between species, honoring the memory of a golden retriever who refused to abandon his master, even in death. And every Sunday morning, someone from the group would visit Thomas and Captain's grave. They'd leave flowers, fresh water, and sometimes dog treats balanced on the bronze statue's head, a playful tribute. Henry retired eventually, but he trained his replacement on one crucial task. On the anniversary of that miraculous morning when 7 dogs appeared at the grave, the cemetery holds a special event. They call it Loyalty Day. Dog owners from across the country bring their pets to Riverside Cemetery. They walk together, share stories, and celebrate the profound connections between humans and animals. The event raises money for senior dog rescues and kill shelter prevention programs. Hundreds of dogs have been saved because of it. Captain dogs, they call them. The ones that nobody wants. The old ones, the broken ones, the ones scheduled for euthanization. People come specifically looking for them now, wanting to give them the kind of love that Thomas gave Captain. Sarah, now in her 50s, still visits the grave every week. She brings her new dog, a senior pit bull named Grace that she rescued 3 years ago. Grace always sniffs the bronze statue carefully, then lies down beside it for a few minutes, as if paying respects. "I like to think Captain knows," Sarah often tells visitors. "I like to think he knows how many lives he saved, how many people he inspired, how his story changed the world just a little bit. And maybe he does. Because on quiet Sunday mornings, when the cemetery is empty and the mist rolls in from the river, Henry's replacement swears he sometimes sees a golden shape lying peacefully on that grave. Just for a moment, in the corner of his eye, before it fades into the dawn light. Some people say it's just a trick of the light, a shadow, imagination. But others know better. Love like that doesn't just disappear. It echoes. It ripples. It transforms into something bigger than itself. Captain came to that grave in grief and found a pack. He came seeking his master and found a mission. He came to die and instead taught the world how to live. That's the power of loyalty. That's the gift of unconditional love. And that's why, years later, people still make pilgrimages to Riverside Cemetery, still leave flowers at a grave marked by a bronze dog, still cry when they hear the story of an abandoned shelter dog who refused to abandon the man who saved him. Because in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, we need these reminders. We need to know that devotion still exists, that love transcends death, that we're never truly alone if we open our hearts to connection. Captain wasn't just a dog. He was a teacher, a healer, a symbol of everything pure and good in this world. And his lesson is simple: love completely, forgive instantly, and never ever abandon those who need you. If a discarded shelter dog could teach us that, imagine what we could teach each other. So here's what I want you to do. Comment below and tell me about a pet that changed your life. Share their name, share their story, because every animal deserves to be remembered the way we remember Captain. And if this story moved you, follow this channel, because next week I'm sharing another incredible true story about the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. You won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's build a community that celebrates loyalty, love, and second chances. Because Captain's story didn't end at that grave. It's still being written every time someone adopts a senior dog, every time someone chooses compassion over convenience. Be part of that story. Comment, follow, and share this with someone who needs to remember that love never dies.